Hey everybody, and welcome back to Civics. And today we're going to be talking about the cabinet and the different departments that are a part of it. Because we're going to talk a little bit about the executive branch. Now, the cabinet was created under the first president, George Washington, and it had all the different advisors, like these very important advisors that he was going to have. So, for instance, he had someone who was going to help with like diplomacy, and someone who was going to help with the treasury. And these different people of his kind of inner circle became the cabinet. And now that position or those people have grown. There's more cabinet members, and they're the main advisors to the president, and they all have to be approved by the Senate. So they're important mostly because of that approval that's needed to get them into that position. They have to be extremely qualified, generally, to be members of the cabinet. So let's get started just talking about it. The original departments that existed when George Washington was around, the first cabinet departments he made were the State Department, which handled foreign policy and diplomacy, the Treasury Department, which handled money and taxes and stuff like that, the War Department, which kind of in the name you already figured that one out probably, and then the Attorney General, which ended up being the Justice Department. It wasn't called the Justice Department back then, but that's what it ends up becoming, the Justice Department, and that deals with executing the laws and figuring all that kind of stuff out. So those were the original kind of things that the American president decided. This is what we need so that we can, I can do my job right. I need people who can help me with these things. Now, since then, obviously that has changed, and I'm going to kind of talk through each cabinet position, each cabinet department, talk a little bit about what each one does, so you kind of have an idea of what these people are actually doing. So the State Department, like I said, they carry out U.S. foreign policy and international relations. So they're kind of like the boss for all of the American ambassadors and embassies. And they also, when they need someone to go and talk to another country, or if there's high-level talks between nations, the Secretary of State can go instead of the president. So the president's needed at home. The Secretary of State might do the traveling part of that foreign relations job. He or she leads the department, and in the presidential line of succession, the Secretary of State, the leader of the State Department, is the first cabinet position that's in line to take over for the president. So in that succession, remember, there's President, VP, Speaker of the House, President pro temp, Secretary of State. So Secretary of State's the highest level cabinet position then, because of that foreign policy experience. There are a lot of notable people who have been the Secretary of State. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Henry Clay, Madeleine Albright was the first female Secretary of State, Colin Powell, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, right? These are all very important members of the American government over the years. And also the Department of State, the Secretary of State is often a position that can transition you to being the president. It has one of the highest rates of presidential election success after being the head of that department. So it does hold some weight if you're the Secretary of State. The next department was the Department of Treasury, and it oversees the U.S. Mint and the IRS, and its job is really to manage the U.S. debt, supervise banks, and kind of help set fiscal policy. The biggest person that you'd probably know about for the Department of Treasury is Alexander Hamilton. He was the one who set up the Department of Treasury. He was the one who established America's first real banking system, and he kind of wrote the majority of the beginning of the financial system that America had. If you've seen the musical Hamilton, you would know a little bit more about him. But in this context, he was the one who kind of shaped the department originally. The Department of Defense, which was the War Department, it's now called the Department of Defense. They renamed it. So its job is to coordinate and supervise all agency related to national security and the armed forces. So that puts a lot of different things under their belt. For instance, they run the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, all of them. Those are under the Department of Defense. They also run a lot of different intelligence communities like the NSA, the NRO, the DIA. And then they also run two war colleges that the military uses to train officers, the National War College and the Eisenhower School. So those are both schools that are run directly by the Department of Defense. There are some notable people who have also been the Department of Defense chairman or the Secretary of Defense. For instance, James Monroe was. John Calhoun, who became president, was. No, he did not. Yeah, he did. Yeah, maybe. Now I'm forgetting. Oops. Jefferson Davis. That was after the Civil War, by the way, that he was the Department of Defense chairman. Robert Todd Lincoln, who was Abraham Lincoln's son, he ran the Department of Defense. Um, President Taft, Dick Cheney, and then recently we've had Jim Mattis was our latest Department of Defense, or the latest, sort of the latest. He was almost the latest, but he left or he got fired. Or, it's kind of shaky these days on why they leave. Um, but he was one of the last ones to be the Secretary of Defense. All right, the Department of Justice, which kind of formed around the Attorney General. There's now I don't know if they're called the Secretary of Justice. That seems like a weird name. I think it's just the Attorney General runs it. And they're responsible for enforcing law and kind of administering justice in the country. So they basically just help the president enforce the laws, because that's what his executive branch does. And it was officially formed in 1870. So there was kind of these agencies and things that were part of the Department of Justice, but it wasn't officially the Department of Justice until 1870, and that happened under President Grant. And the reason he formed it was so that he could better control the South after the Civil War. They were being unruly and they were trying to do Reconstruction, and so he needed to form the Department of Justice to make sure that these rules were being followed and everything was okay, okie dokie. It oversees the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the DEA, and the ATF. These are all important organizations that help with law enforcement. And it also administers the federal prison system. And now, this happened a lot later, I think in the 90s, and now it has the ability to review the actions of local law enforcement agencies. So if a local law enforcement agency messes up, the Department of Justice is able to review and then punish those local authorities for not following federal law. The Department of Interior sounds kind of boring, but it's actually a pretty important department. It manages and conserves federal lands and resources. So it runs like the EPA and the National Park Service. And it's kind of the department that administers programs for original Americans. So they run what's called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So any of the tribes that are still around, the ones that we didn't eliminate or destroy or massacre, that are still here, that's the bureau that deals with those tribes that have sovereignty within our borders. It's also kind of known as the Bureau of Everything Else because it has a very wide range of responsibilities. It kind of just handles this very big list of things. It's kind of hard to fit in a short video like this, what they all do, but they do a lot of stuff. Next is the Department of Agriculture, and that helps the government developing and executing laws about farming, forestry, and then they also help with rural economic development. So rural areas often struggle economically. This department tries to help them stay alive, stay afloat, be successful. They run a lot of the subsidies that go to farmers. They're the ones who help implement those subsidies. And they also run the food and nutrition service programs like SNAP and WIC. So those kind of programs that you might have seen in your grocery stores, those are run by the Department of Agriculture. 80% of the department's budget ends up going to those programs. So it's a pretty big part of what they do. The Department of Commerce is in charge of promoting economic growth. So they're really tied with business and small business and large business growth. It gathers economic data so the government can make big decisions about what to do with the economy. And it also runs several different services like the Patent Office, the National Weather Service, the Civil Aeronautics Authority, the Public Roads Administration, and the Federal Works Agency. So all those different things are run by the Department of Commerce. The most active Secretary of Commerce was actually Herbert Hoover. Before he became president and the economy tanks, Herbert Hoover was the guy who kind of set up the Department of Commerce to be what it is today. And then as president, he ran he didn't run it into the ground. It was going to happen whether he was president or not, but he didn't help any. The Department of Labor is in charge of occupational safety, wages and hour standards, unemployment benefits, and like reemployment programs. So their goal is kind of foster and promote the well-being of workers and then retirees as well. Um, the first female cabinet member was the department from the Department of Labor, and that was from 1933 to 1945 under FDR. Her name was Frances Perkins, and the building that the Department of Labor actually works in now is named after her. She's a pretty cool lady. A relatively new one is called the Department of Health and Human Services. It promotes the health of all Americans, kind of in the name. It also runs the U.S. Public Health Service, which has the Surgeon General in it. If you ever seen like a Surgeon General warning, he's kind of like the doctor of the United States. So that's part of the Department of Health and Human Services. But they also run the CDC, which is getting a lot of news time right now. The Medicare and Medicaid programs, the FDA, and a lot of like substance abuse and mental health programs are run through the Health and Human Services Administration as well. The next one is called the Department of Housing and Development, and that department is all about dealing with housing, metropolises, growth of cities, that kind of thing. So this was part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program back in the 60s when he wanted to eliminate poverty. That clearly didn't work out very well because there's still lots of poverty in the United States, but he gave it a good old shot. Its current responsibilities include regulating Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are just running those sorts of things, enforcing some fair housing laws that exist, and then enforcing laws that deal with like lead and hazardous housing materials. So like asbestos, lead and paint, that kind of stuff. The housing development team works with that. The Department of Transportation runs all federal organizations that deal with transport goods and the population. So anything that has to deal with like trains and airplanes and cars and trucks, all that kind of stuff, they run that sort of thing. And that was created in 1966 by Congress. So the president didn't create that department. Congress did it. They decided it was necessary, and so they made sure it happened. So the Department of Energy deals with all of our energy and safety things around our energy production. And they also run our nuclear program. So anything that has to do with nuclear energy or our nuclear weapons is run through the Department of Energy. Parts of this department were founded in World War II when the Manhattan Project was going on. We were developing those weapons for the first time, but it wasn't actually consolidated into this federal department until 1977, and that was because of the oil crisis. So Jimmy Carter combined all these agencies into one federal department because he figured that it would be good to have a cabinet member who is specifically in charge of those things. The Department of Education actually came out of the Department of Health and Human Services. It used to be all one thing. And then Jimmy Carter, again, also decided that the Department of Education needed to be its own separate thing. And it deals with all the policy about federal assistance in education. It collects data on schools, and it enforces educational laws that deal with civil rights and privacy. So it runs, or it enforces FERPA, which is the law that makes it so that teachers and schools can't just give away your information whenever they want to. And then they also deal with like the civil rights, like Title IX and stuff like that. In 2015, the Department of Education gave almost $29 billion in Pell Grants to students and almost $24 billion in direct student loans. So they have a lot of money going through the department, and a lot of that money goes to specifically aid programs to help people get through college. The Department of Veteran Affairs is one of the newer departments, and it provides comprehensive care to military veterans and VA medical centers. Recently, the VA department has kind of come under fire for not doing its job particularly great. Kind of things are kind of going with that one. We'll have to see what happens. It also manages disability compensation and rehabilitation and like home loans and all those sort of programs that veterans get to receive. They run all those programs. These kind of benefits have been around since the Revolutionary War, but it wasn't actually a specific government agency or cabinet position until 1989. Now, the newest cabinet position is called the Department of Homeland Security, and that was created in 2003, and President Bush II created it during his 2003 reshuffle of duties. So in 2003, he took a bunch of different departments and moved them around and kind of changed the organization of the federal bureaucracy. And because of that, he made this new department called Department of Homeland Security. Its focus is on anti-terrorism, border security, and then immigration and customs, as well as cybersecurity and disaster prevention. So it runs things like border control, customs, ICE, and it also, I'm not sure if FEMA is part of it, but I'm pretty sure it is. So FEMA is also a big part of the Department of Homeland Security. So that was kind of the big thing that President Bush did after 9/11 to deal with all the issues that we were facing as a country. There have been other cabinet level positions from time to time in American history. Remember, these are all supposed to be advisors to the president. So, for instance, the White House Chief of Staff is a member of the cabinet. He's the guy who kind of runs the White House staff and sets the president's agenda and like does that kind of stuff for him. So he's a part of the cabinet. There's a trade representative, so someone who talks about the different like tariffs and trade agreements we have with other countries. So someone who's like really good at that. There's a director of national intelligence that kind of oversees the intelligence agencies a little bit. There's a director of office for the budget. So that for a while was John Mulaney. It's not anymore, but he does all the budgeting work for the White House Department. The director of the CIA is in the cabinet. The director of the EPA is in the cabinet, or at least it was. Currently, I don't believe he's actually in the cabinet. There's a small business administrator. The ambassador to the UN, when we have one, is part of the cabinet level positions. We don't currently have an ambassador to the UN. And then we also have there used to be a council of economic advisors. That council dissolved when President Trump became president. So there's no longer a member from that council in the cabinet because it no longer exists. So those have been other cabinet level positions recently. So like I've said, the cabinet is supposed to be an advisory body. And all those different cabinet positions, all those departments are what's helping the president execute his role in the Constitution. Remember, he's supposed to be the one executing laws and making sure that the government runs the way it's supposed to based on what Congress passes into law. And so all those secretaries who run these departments are basically doing that day-to-day minutia for him so he can focus on the big picture, right? The president's there to make big decisions and lead the country, be the commander-in-chief, that kind of thing. And so these department heads are the ones who are really doing the implementation stuff at his direction. So he's still in charge and he still gets to make the big decisions, but like the day-to-day minutia is handled by these departments and this bureaucracy. So these cabinet level positions are incredibly important, and that's why they're now subject to Senate approval, because the people running these departments should be competent and know what they're doing. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of having them in the first place. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Civics. Looking very forward to the next episode and talking to you more about our government and how it works. Thanks again. See you later.